Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of GameSphere. As the chiptune theme fades away, you are of course greeted by yours truly, Chris Ware, that's me, and I have another delightful show for you good folks today. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about Xonotic, which turns 10 this month, so not quite old enough to drink, but certainly not a toddler. I'm going to be talking about Deus Ex Mankind Divided and how it measures up against its indie competitor, Neon Struct, two rather good games that I would like to just be making a bit of a brief comparison. Also, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some interesting multiplayer titles I've been playing with lately, Don't Starve Together and, of course, Portal 2, two classics in my humble opinion. And I'm also going to be talking about a wonderful open source game that has come out of the LibreJam for this month of the year 2020, of course, which has been an experience and perhaps one that you can join me with at home. Who knows? Anyhow, let's get down to it. Xonotic turns 10. And that's just charming. I love the game. We played it on the last Destination Linux Network Game Fest. So what I will do is I'll link to the gameplay of that down in the show notes, because it was really fun. And, you know, to be fair to Noah, he's a lot better than he lets on. He makes out that he plays games like once a year. Well, he's pretty good. I mean, he wasn't necessarily as good as yours truly, just saying, but like, you know. Anyway, definitely worth a look. It was an absolute blast, pun intended. But, yeah, I mean, to be honest, it really is quite the charming game. For those of you that don't know, Xonotic is a first-person modern-day incarnation of what you might hope for with some of the older Unreal Tournament games. I must admit, I've not really been following the newer ones, but yeah, you're looking at arena shooter, capture the flag, domination, that kind of thing, with some sort of space-agey weapons, some character customization, all open source, most likely in the repository of your distribution, or failing that, it will be in, I don't know, I believe there's probably a flat pack for it. It's around. I mean, it's so common that I can't even remember which version I typically jump to. Probably usually the one that's in the distro repositories, but who's to say, really. Good to see that it's still being maintained. And when it's one of those games that doesn't require a particularly hefty PC. It's got very simple mechanics and it's freely available. That, to me, is what makes a really good multiplayer game, because it means that you can just be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to invite some friends and we're going to play something. It doesn't matter if your friends own the game, whether or not they've got a top of the range PC, any of that business, and it's just nice to have a good old straightforward game. I remember playing its predecessor in little LAN parties that me and my friends had back in my teenage years, and we had an amazing time with that. Yeah, it's not necessarily perhaps the most unique experience going. I like the variety of weapons. I like the layout of the level design. I got to admit, those kind of levels where, you fall off the end of the world and then die. Those aren't always my favorite, because maybe I always end up getting shot off, or I panic and forget where the walls are and stuff like that. But by and large, I like the sort of the ammunition. It's a well lit game, if you know what I mean. The lighting and the sort of all the dynamic effects really are just really quite beautiful as well, with the lasers and all of that kind of stuff. Certainly a game that I recommend. I do bounce around on the single player from time to time, but you're really up against bots in that regard, and it's a game that really does sort of lean itself more towards the multiplayer element than the single player. But if you want to hone your skills, there's ample opportunities to do that in the single player offerings. But if you're perhaps trying to get on the ladder, perhaps if you don't feel competitive enough to go into a public server or anything like that, it does have options there. but yeah, it's a grand old game. I certainly I recommend you folks to pick it up. I'm sure many of you folks have enjoyed it in any way, shape, like in its capacity. Anyway, there is of course a blog post on the Xonotic website celebrating the 10-year anniversary. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. It goes, "Greetings, everybody. This year marks the 10th anniversary since the first commit was pushed to Xonotic's repositories. 10 long years and still going strong. It's truly incredible to see how far the game has come during that time. Many battles fought and friends made along the way." The post goes on to give some thank yous and thoughts on where the game is. But yeah, like it truly is a charming game. It's something that holds a corner of my gaming heart. Xonotic is available under the permissive GPL version 3 license for those of you. So it is proper open source, available on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. But yeah, you're looking for a good arena shooter that is accessible to lots of people. Good old Xonotic. Never had a problem finding players to play it against on that particular game. And I really do quite like it. It, of course, is open for contributions. It's an open source game in the truest sense of the word. Some open source games will have will be like a one-man band type of thing where there'll be one developer who is focused on it, but because of their sort of deeper philosophy, they feel compelled to open source it. But this is like a community effort, and it's what a lot of people turn to when they think of and look to open source games on Linux, and it's good. It's a good cornerstone of the open source arena shooter. Now, there are other arena shooters, some of which perhaps call upon nostalgia a little bit, and in the future I will probably be taking a look at something like Open Arena, which is more, sort of based in the traditional era of the arena shooter, your Quake Arena type of games. This definitely has rolled better with the times, and there are a few other arena shooters that it is standing side by side with, and I'll probably take a look at those also in episodes to come. But yeah, lots of nice active servers. I'm just looking at all the stats pages now, and it's good. The favorite map is After Slime, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I love it. I love it all. I love it all. So, on to the next segment. But yeah, check it out if you haven't already. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about a game which I have enjoyed in a rather ambivalent capacity as of late, right? So to begin, LibreJam is a monthly game jam which begins at the beginning at every month, and is, as you might expect, a game jam where open source games are developed and are pitted against each other in a battle to the not death. So one of these competitors I was looking through is called Stardrag. Stardrag is a game. Oh, I should say that the theme of this month's game jam is engineering in space. And Stardrag is a game made in the Godot or Godot engine. And I love seeing games made in the Godot engine. It does, to me, symbolize a real boon of open source gaming development. And this game it's a simple 2D game, all open source. You use WSAND to control this spaceship. You have to fly from one planet to another without getting caught in the orbit of often other planets and without getting in the way of other spaceships. It's a little bit like Angry Birds, but spaceships, and it's very frustrating because it is a bit like Angry Birds with spaceships. It feels so rewarding when you actually manage to glide this spaceship right down into the planet that you're looking for, dodging other spaceships on the way, using the gravitational pull of the other planets to just, power yourself with momentum. And sometimes, and you have a fuel gauge, you can at times, if you're not particularly efficient, run out of fuel. And if you're lucky, the gravitational pull of some of the other planets can guide you in to the place that you need to land in order to progress in the game. Each time you do a successful flight, you then get 3 tries at the next one, which get reset after every successful flight, which is good. It's nice once you've actually like completed that section of the game. You're safe. You can just then carry on as you go, and then you just rack up points from there. As you progress, more spaceships are in the way to interfere until you cannot, until you cannot carry on any longer. The ship is difficult to control. The mechanics itself are difficult by design. Like, that is part of the game mechanic. They're logical. They make sense. They feel, they feel right, as it were. And it is difficult. Like, it really is a difficult game. I had to sit down for quite some time to actually work out strategies and rhythms of the game. And while it is a very simple game, it's one that actually kind of is, at least to me, if you're interested in, mechanical games and games that sort of draw you in through those mechanisms, you'll probably get a decent amount of interest out of it. Again, game jam games are not necessarily made with the intent of extended periods of keeping you in, but rather, they're usually like, I don't want to say gimmick, because that kind of sort of underwrites them more than they should, but like it takes a mechanic and it focuses on it and it does that thing well. I actually really like game jam games for that reason. Like, they have that focus that a lot of bigger games don't have, and then they can zero in on that focus. They can do that one thing, they can have that one mechanic, they can do it really well, and then you can get sort of your enjoyment out of that. Like, I like simple games, I like straightforward games, and by extension, I often like to bounce around various game jams to see what is, what's being made out there. So I'll of course put a link to Star Drag in the description below, and please, let me know how you get on with it. Is it as difficult as I think it is? I think it's really quite difficult, so I'm going to put that on there. And it is rage inducing. Like, it's like, another spaceship flew into me, or the gravitational pull of that giant star or whatever is just like knocked me off course. And I like that it's in short beats as well, so every whether or not you succeeded or failed in a very short amount of time, and it doesn't drag you out. You're not carrying on with a flight, not knowing whether or not you're going to, it's like, if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. You can crash into other spaceships, you can crash into other planets, and then there's a whole selection of levels that you can do, which fundamentally equate to just various arrangements of planets and such. Simple, effective. I like it. It's and it's just a download and run type of affair. So like I say, I'll put the link to it. I'll also put a link into the LibreJam game jam as well, because I think that would be of interest to many of you good folks. But I do have to say, it's worth a look. It's worth a look. Some of you are going to hate it. I won't lie. Some of you are going to hate it. But if some of you are going to, it's going to scratch it's going to scratch that itch of wanting to fly, to have that, to have those moments where you've just pulled off a trick shot, where you've just glided through as you imagined in your head, and you've pulled off a good landing and everything, and it's just like, nice, yeah, so it's good. Those games are good. Like, it is, and I do like, I'll probably bounce back a few, like game jam games in future episodes, because they're just interesting. Like, it's in many cases they're games made by people who don't make games. They'll make other pieces of software, or it'll be a hobby to them, and seeing that sort of breath of fresh air into gaming is I think worthy of note. But yeah, let me know how you get on with it if you decide to try it. All kinds of terrible things can happen when you don't take care of your digital security, and that of course includes your passwords. The password manager used and trusted by the Destination Linux network is Bitwarden. Bitwarden lets you set up things like a PIN to easily access your password manager, as well as additional authentications such as master passwords and adding phrases to fingerprint security, all the things to keep your passwords safe. Bitwarden is the easiest and safest way for individuals, teams, and businesses to store, share, and sync sensitive data. Go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started for free. To make things even better, Bitwarden is 100% open source. You can self-host and their code is audited. Go to bitwarden.com/DLN to get started for free. The $10 a year premium account gets you 1 gigabyte of encrypted file storage, 2-step login with YubiKey, U2F, Duo, Vault Health Reports, time-based one-time password authenticator storage and generation, priority customer support. So, from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank Bitwarden for sponsoring this episode of GameSphere and for all round being a good egg to the Destination Linux network. Thank you very much. So I've recently completed Deus Ex Mankind Divided on my Twitch stream at the request of quite a number of my viewers, and I'd like to share a few thoughts on it, but also I'd like to compare it with an indie game which seeks to get a foothold in the same genre, really. So, Deus Ex Mankind Divided is the latest game in a long-running franchise near and dear to my heart, the Deus Ex franchise. I grew up on the first Deus Ex game, and I remember that Deus Ex Invisible War, the first sequel in that franchise, was one of the first games I was genuinely hyped about when, you're like waiting for new news about the game and you're excited and something's coming out and, and you've got that anticipation. That, like, Invisible War, I think might have been one of the first games that I really felt that for. And I feel it very rarely since then at all. And even though Invisible War, the second in the franchise, got slated by the reviews, I must say I enjoy it, and it's probably one of my favourite in the entire franchise. So they try new things in Mankind Divided that you haven't seen in previous Deus Ex titles. This is the first Deus Ex game where there are missions in daylight. That, to me, does not feel like Deus Ex. It just doesn't. Another thing that is different is that it's set in Prague, where no previous game has been set, but Deus Ex is a jet setting around the world kind of game, so that's not necessarily unexpected. But what is unexpected is that the Prague hub is the only one in the game. Whereas with other previous Deus Ex titles, you would go from city to city to city, and you'd have like lots of small hubs that you'd visit along the way. You kept returning to Prague, and it was much bigger than your standard Deus Ex hub level, and there was more to it, but it also changed quite dynamically from visit to visit over the course of the time of the game. Sometimes it really was not a fun level to be in. Sometimes it was, but I do kind of feel that it was perhaps a little big in terms of size for a Deus Ex level. And whilst it was kind of interesting for them to take this approach, it kind of didn't feel like Deus Ex. Deus Ex has a very specific feel, very specific atmosphere. That's the thing that the game really drew people into. And I feel that Mankind Divided started challenging the part of the Deus Ex franchise that they did best. And I feel that didn't necessarily... I mean, that's a high-stakes gamble. With, for example, previous titles like Invisible War, with, for example, with Human Revolution as well, you had smaller hubs, and I will say that Human Revolution fell into a similar trap where their hub levels were perhaps a little bit on the large side. But at least with Human Revolutions, the levels did feel more dense. With Mankind Divided, it felt that a lot of the levels were spread out. There were a lot of segments in the game where there just wasn't that much. Like, one of the things I loved about Deus Ex is it was a sort of open world game, but it was dense. There was lots to do, lots to find, lots to discover in very smallish open world spaces, right? So it was open world, but it was small. So it meant that without too much work, you could become really familiar with the level, which, allowed for great replayability, because it can make you think, oh, what happens if I did that? Or what happens if I came in through there? Oh, I came in through the sewers last time, so I'll come in through the roof the next time, and all this kind of stuff. And because you had a greater grasp of all of the levels without having to put so many hours into the game, you had a greater chance to plan your next maneuver, plan your next point of entry and all that kind of stuff. And Mankind Divided, it kind of feels like too much in that regard. And there were a lot of places that just looked like they were there for decoration rather than, and there are places in the original Deus Ex games that are there for decoration, but they tell a bit of the story. The thing is with Mankind Divided is that the little stories of the characters you meet does not feel real, because in a lot of cases the stories are just told to you through dialogue, whereas in the original Deus Ex you would look through someone's apartment and you would find how they lived, and they would show you the story. It was, the original games were much more show don't tell, and I find this a lot with a transition between older games to modern games. And to me, the reasoning seems obvious. It's in many ways uncreative storytelling, and now that we have the means to basically make games as big as we want them to be, we kind of exploit that too much. It becomes, for example, I remember when Elder Scrolls Oblivion came out, and they had so much trouble fitting all of that voiced dialogue onto the game CDs. The game before it, Morrowind, had very little voice acting in it, and as a result, they allowed for so much other stuff in the game. But in order to make the game engaging, they had to find ways of storytelling that was interesting, and they would have little layouts. They would have little visual cues, things that weren't in your face and obvious, that you'd work it out, that you'd pay attention to. It would give you reasons to look and inspect in the environment. Deus Ex had this as well, and even the earlier Fallout, actually Fallout is very, very good at this. The Fallout franchise, but I'm thinking specifically of Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4, is that they have these little rooms that are laid out that the way that they look in and of themselves tell part of the story. But it definitely, with older games, because they had so much trouble, or not because they had so many limitations in terms of technical limitations, in terms of file size limitations, they had to be a lot more creative with their storytelling, and were compelled to be a lot more creative with their storytelling, doing a lot more showing and not telling. Whereas nowadays, I just kind of feel like, oh, there's a part of the story we want the viewer to be aware of. Let's just stick it in a narrative. Let's just have these long conversations about people talking about their backstory like it's an incredibly overt kind of thing, where you even have characters sort of in Mankind Divided explaining why they're the way that they are, which to me just strikes me as being absurd. I'm a grizzled war veteran because I experienced trauma in before the game began, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like you've just explained your character. There's no. It feels so unorganic, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and it does that in many cases. And I think that Mankind Divided doesn't do this as well. Now, I've only played through the game once, so maybe this might become more apparent as time goes by, or through replays, but by and large, I did kind of feel like it lost that little bit of magic. And this is where we get to Neon Struct. Neon Struct feels like a modern incarnation of the early Thief games, Thief 1 and Thief 2. Thief 1 and Thief 2 were very, very brave endeavors, because I don't necessarily say that they invented the first-person stealth genre, but they were certainly at the forefront of it. And they certainly did it incredibly well for the time, considering that there was, they didn't have easy big predecessors to work off of. That they were challenging a lot of the status quo and a lot of the games of the era by genre shifting, and by even creating and trailblazing in the stealth genre. And Neon Struct sort of takes what they did well and then applies that in the mechanics of it all, but then also puts it into a very Deus Ex-like world. You play Neon Struct, you will the references to Deus Ex will be obvious. In fact, the main character in Neon Struct is called Gillian Clary, JC, which is, JC being the name of the protagonist in the first Deus Ex game. So it's there, it's abundant, it's obvious. The way that the hub levels are designed in Neon Struct are obvious, references to Deus Ex as well. I like the stealth meter. There's a stealth meter at the bottom of Neon Struct. In Mankind Divided, I think that was the first game, if I recall correctly, where there was a stealth meter as well, which was helpful, all things considered, and I did like that just as a base mechanic of it all. Neon Struct did it really, really well, and the graphics are very, very, very simple, and I like that. Like, it works with very few complex assets, with very, it portrays this atmosphere that is so cold. The sound design in this game, whilst minimalist, is also really good at conveying this atmosphere, like the sound of the footsteps on concrete flooring, like the soundtrack of the game comes from radios in the world, and the soundtrack is by a band called the Home Improvements. They have their albums up on Bandcamp. Great band, actually. I'll put a link to them if I can remember in the show notes for this video. Actually, the soundtrack to this game is amazing, and it's put into the game organically through these radios, and how it echoes out through these minimalist halls of a dystopian future is chilling, and it's amazing. And it's like how little things in Neon Struct really tell you about the world. Like, they don't have trees; they have these artificial trees that light up. Sometimes the messages of the world are quite explicitly mentioned through characters in the game, but really they capture the Deus Ex atmosphere, the thing that made the original Deus Ex game so magical. They capture that in Neon Struct. The game itself is actually quite short. One of the things that I felt quite strongly about some of the more recent Deus Ex games, Mankind Divided and Human Revolution, they're too long. They're too long. And I suppose there are sort of like economic reasons for it. But at the end of the day, and also, like, I think this depends on a sort of situation of life type of thing where, if you've got lots of time to play games, then a really long game is going to be something that you're going to be really sort of pleased about. But Neon Struct is shorter, and I think as a result of that, it makes it have a deeper impact. Also, it means that, like, having a really good game that has great replayability and compels you to replay to understand the levels better, but is shorter, is definitely better than a game that is longer that you'll only play once or twice. Like, I love replayability in games, and I love complex levels and great things. One thing I will say about Neon Struct, and I don't know whether or not you consider it to be a fair comparison that Neon Struct is done by a much smaller studio, but you do not have much in the way of character development in terms of from the RPG side of things in Neon Struct. Your character does not build on skills. They get a few gadgets and all that kind of stuff, but they do not have a skill tree. In the original Deus Ex, they do, and that was kind of cool, actually. So with the original Deus Ex, you could become a faster swimmer, you could hit harder, you can also build your character with powers. So you can jump higher, you can turn invisible, and you can manipulate the electronic world around you, and all these kind of things. And as a result of that, the original Deus Ex, they had to build their levels so that any character build can make their way through them. So there would be parts of the level that you could swim through, there'd be parts of the level that you could jump over. And the difference in character builds lent itself to really complex and well-created level design. With Neon Struct, because everyone plays with essentially the same character through the game, I kind of feel that the levels, whilst interesting, multi-layered, and replayable, are not as complex and intricately designed as the original Deus Ex. That's not a fair comparison per se, and it's not necessarily a true critique, because the level design in Neon Struct is amazing. But I think the thing that Neon Struct captures so well is that atmosphere, which I think has not been captured by Mankind Divided. And I think that Neon Struct, as an homage to the Deus Ex franchise, is incredibly successful because it captures what we remember about the game. I also feel that it sort of updated it in certain ways, particularly as well with the stealth mechanics. Also with the basic graphic design, I like that in a lot of ways because it means that the artifacts in the world, they're very clear. You know what you're looking at, you know what you can see, all of that kind of stuff. It's a very clear world. Absolutely. So I'm sort of rattling on a little bit. I'm going to put a link to both of those games in the show notes. But yeah, Neon Struct, definitely worth a look. Definitely worth a look if you are looking for a spiritual successor or a spiritual reinterpretation of the Deus Ex franchise. Great stealth mechanics, great atmosphere. And I had a great time playing it, and I'm certainly going to be playing it again. And I probably will be playing Mankind Divided. Like, that adds some good moments in it too. But ultimately, because of how Mankind Divided was received by the community, I question whether or not we'll see another Deus Ex game in the franchise soon. It's rare that these franchises will ever be, completely left behind and discarded. I suspect in a couple of years they might try with a reboot, and I think, quite frankly, that's probably for the best because. And just on a personal note here, I didn't really find the main protagonist, Adam Jensen, as particularly engaging or interesting. He felt very generic, gravelly voiced, dude, really, like stereotypical action hero type of territory. And even with characters before him, with the JC Denton and with the Alex Dentons, they were maybe not the most interesting of characters, but they at least weren't so dang generic, But that being said, it'd be interesting to see how the series cracks on. But I think there's I'll be interested in the indie successors to or indie spiritual successors rather. This episode of GameSphere is brought to you by, of course, DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean recently announced their new app platform service, which is a solution to build modern cloud-native apps. With App Platform, you can build, deploy, and scale apps and static websites quickly and easily. Simply point to your GitHub repository and let the App Platform do all the heavy lifting. It has support for Node.js, Python, Go, PHP, Ruby, static sites, and Docker. DigitalOcean runs their app platform on their own infrastructure, so your costs are significantly lower than with other products. Plus, they built this new app platform on top of DigitalOcean Kubernetes, providing a smoother migration path so you can take more control over your infrastructure setup. As a listener of the GameSphere podcast and the Destination Linux network, you can get started for free. And in fact, better than free, because DigitalOcean is giving you $100 of credit when you sign up by going to do.co/DLN. That's do.co/DLN. We want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of the GameSphere and for generally being kind to the Destination Linux network. Thank you very much, DigitalOcean. That's wonderful. So one of my favorite multiplayer games of all time, Don't Starve Together, has entered the Winter's Feast event. Now, this is an annual event on the game. It's been running since 2016, and it basically means that the game enters a Christmas period. That means that certain items in the game become Christmassy. There are Christmas-themed mini-games and treats and trinkets and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to put some footage up of my friend Matt ruining Christmas. So for those of you that don't know, Don't Starve Together is a wonderfully fascinating and unique survival game which sees several characters mysteriously transported to a realm known as the Constant. They know little about it, other than it somewhat comedically mimics parts of reality, with animals like the moose goose and the beerger and the deer clops. And if those words mean nothing to you, they certainly will do once you've faced them in the game. These are some quite formidable creatures, I can assure you. But yeah, you play with your friends. It is by and large cooperative, although there are more combative game modes. And the aim of the game is to survive, to not starve. You go through your 4 seasons: autumn, winter, spring, and summer, each with their own challenges. So, for example, in winter, you've got to stave off the cold. In summer, you've got to stop yourself from getting too hot. In spring, you've got the rain. And in the autumn, you have the beerger. And you'll work out what the beerger is, I can assure you. Now, with the winter and the summer, they're the more intense seasons that you have to, bunker down for in a lot of cases, or deal with. And you use your spring and your autumn in order to, they're your easier seasons, so that you can then prepare for what lies ahead. The art style of this game is absolutely beautiful, and I've got to give it to Clyde, the developers. They have added and built on this game. They never had to. Like, they could have just rolled this game out the door and left it, but they have been adding tons and tons of free content for years now, simply because of their passion for this game. And I thank them enormously. Now, it is paid DLC when it comes to things like cosmetics, and that's what they've been using as a mechanism to keep the game financially supported through all of this. But it's nice that when they release a lot of the in-game DLC, or a lot of the in-game extras and the new stuff into the game, like, that's available for everyone, and those that just wish to support can then buy the cosmetics to keep the development of the game running, and that to me is really quite nice, because it means that then players with money and players without money are not really, separated. Or even still, casual players that just want to play from time to time. There are free ways to unlock a lot of the gear as well. So it's not like if it's not like if you're not really buying any of the DLC, you're left out in the cold. There's plenty of stuff, and in fact, there's stuff that can only be unlocked for free as well, if I'm not mistaken. So that's all pretty cool. You play as different characters, and these different characters can very much determine your different play style. You can play as a character that's quite good at combat, or you can play as a character that's quite good at crafting, or crafting in different ways. There's one character that's particularly good at cooking meals, and in a game like Don't Starve, well, that certainly has its advantages. You have characters that can grow a hearty beard and keep themselves warm. It's a game that really does keep you on your toes. Like, you can find yourself playing. I think I played for like 5 hours just last night with some friends, and it tires you out. It keeps you engaged, and it really does sort of it tests your friendship. And if you can come out the other side remaining friends, you'll be close as you've ever been. I can assure you that. Yeah. And the add-ons that they throw that they throw out as well are fantastic. Like, one of the more recent additions is seafaring. You can build a ship and be a pirate on the high seas, and that is amazing. I love seafaring in the game as well. It's so fascinating, so exciting, and you're exploring the unknown in a world of unknowns. It's absolutely fantastic. So, I do have to give this game a recommendation. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's wonderful. And entering the Winter's Feast it's given you a reason to pick up the game again, a nice little prompt. And a lot of my friends who are perhaps a little bit more Christmassy than myself have really enjoyed building a Christmas tree and decorating it in the game as well as doing some of the Christmas challenges, like you got to hunt down a gingerbread. It's not a gingerbread man, it's like a gingerbread sheep or something. I don't know. But yeah, and they add characters from time to time as well, with little short films to introduce them, which are wonderful. The world that the world of Don't Starve is such an interesting world as well. Like, it does keep your attention, about how a failed magician was thrown into this realm and became the master of it. It truly is remarkable, and it is kind of got that sort of Victorian aesthetic as well, which is very creepy. And Really quite nice, really quite charming. Done by a studio that genuinely cares about the game. Oh, Gingerbread Pig. There we go. And there's a gingerbread pig house and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're a fan of gingerbread baked goods, then the Winter's Feast is good for you. It's a grand, yeah, and also actually there are some they have thrown in a rather interesting game mechanic of the Christmas feast. So not only in this game are you struggling to balance your not starving, as it were, but you've also, of course, got your physical health in terms of health points, damage. So you don't want to get hit and hurt too badly, but also you have to juggle your mental health as well. And actually having the Christmas feast is an interesting new mechanic and a new way to help your mental health there, which is pretty good. All characters have to deal with it, and the world will affect their mental health in different ways. But you have to work cooperatively to get the best of all your strengths and to mitigate all of your weaknesses. It's a great team building game. Great for teamwork, and yeah, like it's everything that I want out of a cooperative game. It works across Windows, Mac, and Linux. I think that it's on other platforms as well, maybe mobile, possibly like the Nintendo Switch or something. But it's not cross-platform other than across the PC versions. But yeah, absolutely wonderful game, and it's nice to see the Winter's Feast back with some new interesting stuff. So yeah, if you're inclined, give it a look. And to round off this largely multiplayer themed episode of Gamesphere, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Portal 2. Yes, it's not exactly recent, I know. But man, is it a masterpiece. And I've recently rediscovered it with my lovely girlfriend, Rebecca. We played one of the community maps. The community maps are really good, especially on multiplayer. You can decide to play games based on like their rating. So we always end up just playing the highest rated games, highest rated puzzles that we haven't played. They usually take me in the ballpark of like 90 minutes with the partner to solve. I've played many a community map on Portal 2. And they're just like they're great fun, but they'll tire your brain out. Like it's a brain workout, I can assure you on that. You play as Atlas and Peabody, two charming robots. I guess they're charming. I mean, they don't really talk, but they kind of have characters, and the way that they work through the plot of the co-op section of Portal 2 is great. The co-op main story mode section of Portal 2 is great as well, but that won't take you too long to complete. Usually with friends, it'll be a couple of sessions, and we'd have completed it. But it's nice just to have a one-off go at the community maps, which, yeah, I mean, some community maps will be short. You'll do them in half an hour. Some will be like quite long. Might take you the best part of 2 hours, and unfortunately there isn't really an easy way to work out how long one's going to take, especially if you get stuck on one of those really annoying puzzly bits where it's like right in front of you and you just can't work it out there and then all of a sudden you'll just get that moment of clarity, the light bulb bing will go off above your head and you'll work it out. So yeah, set some time aside for it. I personally am always incredibly frustrated when I don't have the time to properly work out a puzzle. I always try and do it with enough time to make sure. And there will be moments when you're facing a puzzle and you think, I can't solve this, and like it's a test of your mental mettle to push through, and it is so rewarding. There are few games as rewarding. I know I talk about that a lot in games when it's like the rewarding factor, that dopamine rush you get from like winning. But to me, beating a good co-op puzzle in Portal 2 will just hit that spot. I will feel so smart when I complete that puzzle. And I will go so far as to say Portal 2 is a masterpiece. It's a puzzle game. You play with portals. I would give a little bit more background about the game, but you've probably already seen a fair amount of it now on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. But yeah, like it's just a puzzle solving game. You use portals, you shoot a hole in the wall, and then you go in one hole, it comes out another. And there are, factors that are amalgamated out of that. it's one of those games. It has one of those characteristics of games that I truly love, where they take a reasonably straightforward game mechanic and build the game around that. They don't make the game any more complex than it needs to be. It's comprehensible in the mind of the end user, the player, and then from that you bring in new puzzles where you apply those core mechanics, and it's great. It's great. It's a bit like Super Hot in that regard, although, you would obviously say that Portal 2 is the grandfather of the, or Portal is the grandfather of the genre there. But yeah, Portal 2, like, some people will say that, like, Portal 1 was like the true masterpiece. Like, it was 100% of a game and 100% of a great game. Like, it did not put a foot wrong. Whereas then people will then go on to say that Portal 2 might be like 200% of a game, 180 of which is amazing. Like, is perfect. There's 20% that's not quite perfect there. So there's more to Portal 2, but there are also small imperfections in that formula. I would be inclined to disagree. I think Portal 2, I would say, is every bit as much of a masterpiece as its predecessor. Both masterpieces in their own way, both amazing trailblazers in their own way. I think that Portal 2's biggest strength is in the co-op, definitely. Like, the Portal 2 single player, as amazing as it is, and some pretty cool voice acting by Stephen Merchant there, it does fundamentally equate to Portal, but with extra stuff. Whereas, bringing in the cooperative component adds just so much more to the game. It's amazing. You have more portals to work with. You have 2 sets of portals, so 4 portals in the cooperative, whereas, with single player you only have 2. So it just opens up the game so much more. And you know what? I'm going to say something which is controversial even amongst myself, which is that I don't think the Portal franchise needs a Portal 3. I know a lot of people anticipate a Portal 3 and they want a Portal 3 because Portal 1 and 2 have just been such amazing games. But you know what? Unless Portal 3 can bring something as groundbreaking to the franchise as either of the 2 predecessors, I think that we should allow Portal 1 and 2 to be and exist as the masterpieces that they are. Some people might argue that future games into the franchise will not affect the quality of the original 2, but by perspective, they often can. It's like a TV series where it starts off with the first couple of amazing series, and then the quality of the show drops off in later seasons, and then that drop off then can make you less likely to want to go back and rewatch that show. In many ways, like, that peripheral effect, that echo effect, that knock-on effect can apply in video games as well. Like, it can sully the franchise. And yeah, like, if Portal 3 is just going to be Portal 2 but new levels with extra bits, with extra bits and pieces in, it's not going to go, it's not going to be a Portal game. A Portal game is groundbreaking in, it brings something wholly new to puzzle games and to the series itself. And I don't think you can do that on demand. I don't think you can't just build a masterpiece and just on demand. Doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. Portal 1 was not built on a massive budget. It was, as I understand it, it was a bit of a side project done with the with the Source engine. And Portal 2, I mean, that cooperative element is it's what I keep going back to. And I love it. I love it. It's the straightforward, many people will also reflect on the plot elements of it and the meaning behind the plot. And there are some great arguments to be had there. Some great video essays, some great points of view, some great, like, what they've done with the plot and the characters and their commentary on the wider world as well, whilst incredibly subtle and by all accounts probably goes over most people's heads, is part of the genius. Like, this is such a remarkable game. But on a more just like basic puzzle game, I love puzzle games. Portal 2 is one of the best. I think we all know it. And if you haven't already, grab a friend and try out the co-op community maps. They're really good. You're going to need a good friend, someone who you can communicate with. You're going to need some good voice chat. Get the Discord up and running, get your Mumble up and running, or your Zoom calls or whatever you use, Skype, I suppose, whatever, and have a go. Like the games go on sale quite regularly, but I suspect most people do have the Portal games, already installed, and it's available on GeForce Now, so you don't even have to install it if you're on GeForce Now. But yeah. Just a game I've been playing this week, and I wanted to tell you about it because I love it. So anyway, that's going to be about it from me today. I'm not going to do feedback in every episode, but if you do have any feedback for the show, I'm just going to bundle it and do it in one section every couple of shows, I think. There's going to be an email address in the show notes, as well as just pop by the Destination Linux Network forums, which will also, of course, be linked in the description and the show notes. But it's been great hanging out with you folks, as always. Send me anything you want me to cover or any interesting news. I'm also on Mastodon, but those of you that are on Mastodon probably already follow me, I think. But anyway, you can go to chrisware.uk to find all the old social media stuff, including, I stream on Twitch and all that business. But yeah, let me know what I should cover. Let me know your thoughts, feedback, feelings, all that business. And thank you folks very much for joining me today. I have been Chris Ware, and you have been listening to The Game Sphere. Toodaloo.